Kendall's budgeting process was like many companies' budgeting process in that each department received a spreadsheet that represented a snapshot in time as to what the data looked like when that snapshot occurred. It was then a very iterative process of back and forth, some consolidation for approval, again more back and forth, then the ultimate consolidation and roll-up for final yearly approval of our budgets. That cycle was typically taking us all the way into February and sometimes even March. With what we were ultimately looking for with a Hyperion planning solution was to squeeze time out of that process to make sure that even as the planning and budgeting was taking place, that changes that were going on in the organization in terms of another month's worth of actuals, a change in headcount, that could be properly reflected because it was working with the environment real time. There's always going to have to be some point where you snapshot the data, but because we were working with a much more efficient process, the amount of data loss or data integrity challenges was diminished down to almost nothing when it came time to go through the approval cycles and get that information back, turned around by the executives and then ultimately fed to the organization. We literally cut 2 months out of our budgeting cycle in our first attempt. And I think some of that had to do with learning curve, and it's going to only improve over time so that we'll be wrapped up in the budget process in a month's time, I'm convinced, once we get used to using the product. And ultimately, as we're doing forecasting each month, and that's our next step along the way, we'll be able to start using those forecasts as the feed to next year's budget. So the amount of time it's going to be necessary is no different than the day or two that we're going to spend refreshing our forecast. And budgeting will be ultimately all set and ready to go for the next year.